Hey folks, we just want to talk to you a little bit today about what's called complex inheritance patterns. We've talked a lot about dominant versus recessive and what's called simple Mendelian inheritance. That is the stuff we just talked about last time where dominant masks the recessive, and it's pretty simple and pretty straightforward here. But not all traits are like that. Some exhibit more complex patterns than that. And so that's what we're going to look at today, is how do complex inheritance patterns play an important role in genetics and how traits are passed on to offspring. So that's what we're going to look at today. And hopefully you'll be able to do some Punnett squares associated with that as well. So first thing, today you're going to be able to examine different patterns of inheritance, things like codominance, incomplete dominance, sex-linked traits, things like that, and then be able to predict offspring based upon parental genes and the inheritance pattern. So if you know the inheritance pattern, you should be able to determine what traits are passed on to the offspring and things like that. All right? So that's what we're going to look at today. If you have any questions, let's move forward. Some genes follow the simple pattern of inheritance. So things like tongue rolling, pea color, things like that. Stuff that we've already talked about in our last unit. But others follow more complex rules. So things like snapdragon colors, blood type, right? You know, A, B, type O, all of those. Color blindness, skin color, all of those things follow more complex rules than the simple dominant versus recessive. And so it's important to examine these traits and see how those traits get passed on from one offspring to the next. And the first one we want to talk about is what's called incomplete dominance. Incomplete dominance, in incomplete dominance, the heterozygous individual shows an intermediate phenotype between the dominant and recessive. So rather than the heterozygous individual expressing the dominant trait, it's going to express a trait in between the dominant and recessive. So one example is the white snapdragon crossed with the red snapdragon, producing pink snapdragons. So because it's incompletely dominant, that's how you know that this happens. The term incomplete dominance will be in the problem, and it will tell you that. And that tells you that when you get a heterozygous individual, that their trait will be something different than the dominant and recessive. It will be somewhere in between the two. So make sure you understand this, that this is different than Mendelian inheritance. This is incomplete dominance, all right? And that heterozygous individual is going to show a trait in between the dominant and the recessive. So, when we look at a problem like this, let's examine it. Short hair is dominant to long hair. The heterozygous individual produces a medium-length hair cat with medium-length hair. Cross a long-hair cat with a medium-hair cat and determine the phenotypic ratio. So, let's analyze this real quick. Short hair is dominant to long hair. We need, and a heterozygous individual is medium-length. So if we're going to have something with medium-length hair, it's going to be SL. Right? Because it's going to be one allele for short hair and one allele for long hair. We're going to cross a long hair cat with a medium hair cat. So, long hair, we know that the long hair cat, big L, and the medium length cat is going to be S and L. Alright? Everything else is pretty much the same. Now that we've determined our phenotypes of our parent and genotypes of our parents, let's determine our offspring by drawing out a Punnett square. Again, place the alleles in the proper place and cross them. Now, it asks us to determine the phenotypic ratio. So we need to think, how many of these individuals are going to have short hair? And remember, in order to have short hair, we must be SS. So we're going to have 0 that are short. How many will have medium length hair? 2, right? Because S and L, these two individuals, are heterozygous, They have one short allele and one long allele, and so they're going to express the one in the middle. Long hair, 2, right? Because these will express long hair. So the only real difference is that with phenotypes, you're going to have more than 2. If you remember, in the simple Mendelian inheritance, you had 2 phenotypes. You were either one or the other. You were either yellow or green, tall or short, round or wrinkled. Here, you're going to have one that is in between the 2. You're going to have one that's in between short and long. So make sure you understand that when you go through and perform these problems, because it will ask you, all right, it will tell you it is incompletely dominant. And how else you know that this is incompletely dominant is it tells you that the heterozygous individual produces medium length hair. That tells you that there is something different about this problem, that the heterozygous individual has a unique trait. All right, it has its own trait. And that lets you know that this is incompletely dominant. All right, so there's not a lot of differences here. The only real key thing is that if you are heterozygous, you have your own allele, you have your own trait. All right, let's move on. In codominance, both alleles are expressed in a heterozygous individual. So it's not something in between the two, like tall and short, or in between the two with incomplete, we had medium. Or with the snapdragons, with red and white, we crossed them, we got pink snapdragons. That was incomplete dominance. With codominance, you're going to express both traits. So a red flower crossed with a white flower here is going to produce a red and white flower. Not pink, but red and white. So do you see the difference between codominance and incomplete? Codominance, think like co-president, right? They're both president. Or if you're a co-chairman, you're both the chairman of the committee, all right? With codominance, there are 2 traits that express dominance. So they're both expressed in that particular organism, all right? Blood typing is like this, all right? And we're going to look at that here in just a second. With blood typing, there are 3 alleles for blood. There's A, B, and O. And A and B are both codominant to type O. So if we have type A, we either have AA or AO. Remember that A is dominant to O. With B, you either have BB or BO, where B is dominant to O. But you can have type AB if you have one allele of A and one allele of B. Remember, they are codominant, so both are expressed. All right? With type O, it has to be OO, because both other alleles, both A and B, are both dominant to O. So the only difference here is that instead of just one trait being dominant, we have 2. And that creates a little bit of confusion when we go through and do our Punnett squares, but it really doesn't change a whole lot in the grand scheme of things. Let's do some practice problems. So here we have 2 individuals with type AB blood, and we're going to cross them. All right, that's the first problem we're going to look at. The first problem we're going to look at here, we got 2 individuals with type AB blood. So we are going to cross them, all right, and everything else, all the rules here still apply. You have 2 individuals, AB and AB. We cross them and see what we get from our offspring. So the same things apply. You still fill out a Punnett square, and you determine genotypes and phenotypes based upon what you do in the cross, right? So AB, A, B, okay? And you cross them. So, we look at this, we're going to have one person with type A, we're going to have one person with type B, right? There's your type A, and there's your type B. And we're going to have 2 people with type AB. All right? So the only difference here is that in some instances where we've got 2 traits that are codominant, both traits are expressed. So let's look at the second problem here. We scroll down. Is it possible to have 2 parents with type A blood to have an offspring with O blood or type AB? So we've got 2 parents, both with type A, and it's asking, can we get an individual with type O? Well, if we remember, there are 2 ways we can have type A blood, right? We can either be A, or AO, right? And we're going to cross that with another individual who is AA or AO. So looking at this, is it possible to have an offspring with type O blood? Is it possible with two parents with type A to have an offspring with type O? Well, I see that if I cross these two, AA and AA, I'm going to get all A's. So we know that that can't work out. If I cross one of these with one of these, I'm going to have only one O. So the only way this could maybe happen is if I had used two AO. So let's cross those and see what happens. Yep, right there. Okay, so it is possible. All right, it is possible, but both parents, right? Both parents have to be AO. Okay? Does that make sense? So both parents have to be AO for that to happen. Is it possible having an organism with type AB blood? Can I get AB blood from two parents with type A? No, right? Because there is no B allele in either parent. So if there's no B allele, I can't get AB blood. All right? So it's not just being able to go through and do the problem, but be able to analyze them as well, and then predict what my offspring or parents might be. All right? So you could do a whole lot with parenting and determining who's the father, you know, the whole Maury, you are the father sort of thing. Get all kinds of really cool stuff with that. All right? What's great about multiple alleles is that there are multiple traits involved. And this is what allows for more than 1, 2, or 3 phenotypes to exist. We have more than 2 alleles that determine the phenotype. So things like height, right? There's not just tall and short in humans. There's not just a group of individuals who are tall and a group of individuals who are short, and that's it. Or even just a group of medium height individuals. All right, there's a wide range of height from 7 feet to 5 feet or shorter or even taller than that. All right, and this has to do because there are multiple alleles in the body that determine height. Same with skin color and hair color. Dog and cat fur have multiple alleles that are present as well. So we're going to look at these and develop a real good understanding of how these occur. So you look at the hair color below, there's just a wide variety of different hair colors that are present, and that is because there are multiple alleles. There are several different traits and different genes that determine hair color, height, and skin color. The last thing I want to talk about is what's called sex determination and sex-linked traits. And we need to look at sex determination first, and that there are 46 chromosomes in the human cell, you already know this, and 2 determine gender, and they're called sex chromosomes. And there are 2 alleles for each sex chromosome, either an X or a Y. If you're XX, you're female. If you're XY, you're male. All right? So we need to get an understanding of that before we move on to sex-linked traits. You can be female if you're XX and male if you're XY. All right? So X-linked traits are only present on the X chromosome. Males only have one X chromosome, so they're more likely to express a recessive trait because they don't have another X allele to mask that. So if men only get one trait, men only get one trait that is one allele that is sex-linked. Women get 2, so they have a chance that they could mask that particular trait. All right? Because they have another X chromosome, they have another allele that could mask that trait. Men don't. So if we have the allele, we have it. We cannot be carriers. All right? So things like red-green color blindness, male pattern baldness. Most X-linked genetic disorders are present in men because women have that extra chromosome that can mask that, all right? That other chromosome is dominant. Women don't get the trait. The only way men cannot have the trait is if they have the dominant allele, all right? If men have the recessive allele, they have the trait. Women can have the recessive allele, but they may have a dominant trait that can mask it, okay? All the Punnett squares work the same. The only difference is that Y chromosomes do not carry these genes, so we leave them blank when we do our Punnett square problems. So for example here, red-green color blindness is a recessive trait. Let's highlight some information here. Red-green color blindness is a recessive trait. Cross a normal male with a female who is a carrier for color blindness. Okay? So, remember, male, the sex chromosomes for male, X, Y. And for female, it's X, X. Okay? Now, in order to show these traits, we're going to use superscripts to determine that. Okay? So let's, red-green color blindness, yet let's use R. So big R will be normal. And little r is colorblind. All right? So we have a normal male. So is that going to be big R or little r? It's going to be big R, right? And we have a carrier female. Carrier, remember, to carry it, we just need to have one. So when we have our carriers, we just have the heterozygous individual. Okay? So let's go through and cross them. All right, so we cross them. All right, remember, the key thing here is making sure you get your parents right. We have a normal male, okay? Male who is not colorblind, so they have a big R. Female is a carrier, okay? Carrier tells us that they have one dominant and one recessive allele. So let's go through and look at our phenotypes. If you have the dominant trait, you're not going to be colorblind, okay? So this individual is normal. This individual is normal, and this individual is normal. So we're going to have 3 normal, and we're going to have 1 that is colorblind. Okay? We'll do some more X-linked problems a little bit later on, but want to make sure that you understand how this works. You've got 3 normal, 1 colorblind here. So, this is pretty simple, pretty straightforward, right? If you have any questions, make sure you let me know. We'll go through some more problems like this, but make sure you read each question very, very carefully to know what your parents are. Once you get your parents, the crossing and the determining of the offspring is actually pretty easy. Hopefully you understand a little bit more about the different patterns of inheritance, and you're able to predict offspring based upon parental genes and the inheritance patterns that are present, whether they be incomplete dominance, codominance, or sex-linked. All right? We'll go through some more practice problems with this, I promise. I know this is a little bit challenging, but stay with me and we'll have a good time. All right? We'll talk to you later, guys. Have a good day.